Hello, welcome to this special segment of the SMSF podcast, where previously you were given a introduction and steps on how to set up a SMSF. However, I didn't discuss in detail on what is an SMSF, what are the advantages and disadvantages of having one, and what's the difference between having a company trustee and an individual trustee. So, what is an SMSF? Basically, it's a trust structure that provides benefits to its members upon retirement. Now, the main difference between a SMSF and other super funds is that the SMSF members are also trustees, which means they have the responsibility of maintaining and operating the SMSF and complying with the SIS regulations. SMSFs can have between 1 and 4 members, as discussed in the previous podcast episode. And one of the main advantages is the level of control that trustees have when it comes to tailoring the fund to meet their individual needs and current circumstances. So, what are some advantages of having a SMSF? Well, yes, you can have up to 4 members, which can all be family members, and the funds stay directly in your SMSF for your benefit until you reach retirement age. Another advantage is you have total control over the SMSF in relation to investing in different assets and different types of assets. Assets which other funds are less likely to invest in. Now, you can also have what we call business real property. So, for example, if you are running a business and your business owns a premises in which it operates, you can transfer that into your SMSF, and therefore you can generate good returns in the SMSF on your business real property while your business continues to pay the outgoings in relation to the property. Your SMSF will only earn the rental income component. That will be discussed in a later podcast episode. The SMSF trust deed also allows you to borrow in order to grow your SMSF portfolio, but that's another risk factor that you need to consider, and that will be discussed in a later episode. The SMSF also has a concessional tax rate, which is 15% of the fund's earnings. So that's income minus the deductions. And capital gains is taxed at 10%. If the SMSF is in pension phase, that will also be discussed later. There's no tax liability. The SMSF will only pay what we call the ATO supervisory levy of $259. All income in the SMSF will be exempt pension income. And likewise, pension payments to the members of your SMSF is tax-free in the hands of the members. But then you might ask, well, are there some disadvantages of having an SMSF? And the answer is yes, there are. Now, if you have a small amount of money to start your SMSF, this will usually be eaten up due to the costs of operating, example, accounting fees and auditors' remuneration. The funds in your SMSF are not available for you until you reach retirement age or preservation age. So please bear that in mind. That can be one of the other disadvantages, especially if you are in need of funds. SMSFs are restricted in how the funds can be used. So, for example, you cannot have the SMSF to lend money to its members. This is providing financial assistance to its members before reaching preservation age, and this is against the superannuation laws. The other disadvantage is if your SMSF has collectibles or artwork as an investment. Now, that's not against the law. However, if there are these types of investments, these must not be stored in the home of any of the members. Otherwise, it will result in a breach of the SIS regulations. So, they're just some types of they're just some advantages and disadvantages for you to consider in having an SMSF. And again, I would recommend and advise you, please seek your professional accountant because these podcasts is in no wise a substitution for financial advice. Now we come to the concept of having a company trustee structure against having individual trustee structures. What are some advantages and disadvantages of having a company trustee? Well, companies have the benefit of limited liability. So, therefore, if the company trustee suffers any liability, the individual directors will not suffer personal liability, except in exceptional circumstances. On the other hand, an individual who acts as a trustee exposes their personal assets. So if you are an individual and you are a individual trustee, you're exposing your assets if there are legal matters that come in. It, if the individual's right of indemnity against the SMSF is not sufficient to discharge the liability, then the individual, you, are still liable for the shortfall. So that's one aspect to bear in mind between having a company trustee or an individual trustee. Now, the other thing is a company continues to function even after the death of one of its directors. So, therefore, control of an SMSF can continue even after the death of a member or a director. It's easier for a corporate trustee to ensure that trust assets are kept separate from the personal assets of the members. The other advantage is it can be simple and more cost effective to make changes to the directors and members in your company trustee. And legal ownership of the SMSF assets do not change when a member or a director is removed. However, there are some disadvantages of having a company trustee in your SMSF. So there's additional expenses. Because you're setting up a company, there's more establishment and running costs. Now, the higher cost is the establishment cost. However, the running cost of the company can be lowered if you are making that company only act as the trustee of your SMSF. So, therefore, annual costs as part of registration to ASIC will be around about the $55 mark per year, depending on how ASIC increases its fees. The other disadvantage of having a SMSF company trustee is that your SMSF is bound by the corporation's legislation, and the trustee company must comply with ASIC and the Corporations Act. Now let's look at having a individual trustee or individual trustees. Let's have a look at some of the advantages. One of the advantages is that there's no ASIC forms to complete when establishing your SMSF. There's no ongoing ASIC reporting obligations to comply with, and there's fewer procedural issues to deal with. So you're not required to have documents for holding trustee meetings, and there's no need to comply with the company constitution. Now, these things may be seen as a advantage of having an individual trustee over a company trustee. However, there are a number of disadvantages or cons in having an individual trustee. One of the disadvantages is you always have to have more than one trustee as an individual, which can cause some issues, especially if an individual dies or becomes mentally unfit to continue acting as a trustee or becomes disqualified. You'll need to always have at least have more than one individual trustee. It may be time consuming and tedious to add or remove members and change the ownership of your assets because remember, as an individual, the assets will need to be in the name of the trustee as trustee for your SMSF. So if you're an individual, let's say person A, your assets will need to be in the name of person A as trustee for ABC superannuation fund. Now, this can get a little bit messy when preparing tax returns because the confusing thing is you can easily mix up the assets of person A with ABC superannuation fund, especially when it's not documented properly. Uh, the other disadvantage of having an individual trustee is that ATO administrative penalties apply to each individual trustee. So this can result in penalties of up to 4 times that of a corporate trustee. Why do I say up to 4 times? Well, if your SMSF has 4 members, well, the penalty will apply up to 4 times that of the as compared to having a company trustee. Another disadvantage of having an individual trustee is that declarations of trust may be required for certain asset types, such as property. So, a property in the name of the trustee needs to be very properly documented because that can cause a confusion by way of the individual as compared to whether you have a company trustee. Property can be in the name of ABC Pty Ltd as trustee for ABC Superannuation Fund. So bear these points in mind where you're considering whether to have a company trustee act as trustee for your SMSF as compared to a individual trustee. The next segment will look at how to prepare a investment strategy and what you need to look for in the different components of an investment strategy. So stay tuned.